is a new generation of farming. We are making sure that we are getting the best out of our land. I got so much bamboo that day. I filled up my basket and my friend's basket too.
Cutting bamboo is hard work, but we need to gather enough for the village.
This is what it looks like when it's just about ready to be harvested.
I think we should wait for a few more minutes.
Okay, but not too long.
Oh, it is. It's the best.
The morning began not with peace, but with a weight pressing down from the sky itself. The sun rising heavy and merciless, burning through the mist that clung to the mountains where the policeman's mother walked alone. Her basket strapped to her back, her hands rough and trembling yet unyielding, for in her heart there was a fire far stronger than age, the fire of love that refused to be silenced. The bamboo forest loomed tall around her, its stalks whispering with the wind, their voices like ghosts of the past, sometimes kind, sometimes cruel. And as she bent to the earth, clawing at roots, peeling away the dirt to reach the tender shoots beneath, she felt as though the land itself was testing her, asking her how much more she was willing to give. Sweat ran down her face, stinging her eyes, soaking the faded cloth at her back, yet she pressed on, each bamboo shoot she gathered becoming not just food but hope, not just hope, but sacrifice. For she knew what she would do the moment she had enough. She would trade it, sell it, and buy a chicken, not for herself, never for herself, but for the daughter-in-law who carried the weight of the family alongside her son. The forest mocked her at times, its silence cutting into her bones, its shadows stretching like fingers to pull her down, yet she spoke to it as though it were a companion, whispering to the trees about her plans, about how her children worked so hard and deserved a moment of warmth, how the daughter-in-law, who often met her with weary eyes, needed to know that a mother's love was not a debt, but a gift given without condition, even if misunderstood. The policeman's mother moved slowly, her body aching with every bend, every lift of the basket, but her spirit surged forward, and when at last she saw the pile grow high, when her fingers bled but her heart swelled, she knew she had enough. She rose, straightened her back despite the pain, and began her journey down the path, whispering a prayer that the day would grant her strength to finish what she had started. At the market, the noise assaulted her, voices colliding, coins clinking, bargains shouted like battles, and she stood small in the chaos, clutching her basket of bamboo shoots as though it were treasure. Some ignored her, some mocked the paltry amount she carried, but she pushed forward, her voice steady, offering the shoots to anyone willing to pay. At last, after countless refusals and sneers, one man gave her just enough, coins cold in her hand, and with those coins she went straight to the vendor who held the chicken, alive and restless, its feathers glinting in the sun, its eyes bright with a wildness she understood. She paid, her hands shaking, and took the bird gently, whispering to it as though it were a child. "You will become a meal," she said softly, "a meal for my children, for my daughter-in-law, so that when they return from their work, weary and hungry, they will taste care, not bitterness." The chicken struggled, flapped once, then stilled, as if it too understood the fate that tied it to love. With the chicken in her basket, the policeman's mother walked the long road to her children's home, the sky heavy above, her feet blistered and sore, yet every step filled with a strange kind of joy, the joy of purpose. Memories haunted her along the way, memories of times she had been misunderstood, of whispers from neighbors who doubted her, of moments when her actions, born of love, were twisted into selfishness in the eyes of others. She remembered the harsh words, the cold stares, the times when even her own children questioned her intentions. But none of it mattered now, because love is not measured in approval. Love is not silenced by suspicion. Love is a force that burns even in the darkest soil. By the time she reached the house, dusk had begun to fall, shadows stretching long across the yard, the silence of absence heavy at the doorway. The children were not yet home, the door locked, the windows still. She set the basket down, released the chicken, and moved quickly, her old hands deft as they boiled water, lit the fire, chopped vegetables, prepared rice. The kitchen filled with the sound of life, steam hissing, knives striking wood, the crackle of fire, and with every movement she whispered to herself, "This is for them. This is for her. This is for the family." She cooked as though the act itself were prayer, as though each cut of meat, each grain of rice, each bubbling sound of soup was an offering not to gods, but to the bond that tied her blood to theirs. Her back bent further, her body cried out with fatigue, but her eyes shone with determination, and soon the meal was ready, a feast by her standards, humble yet rich with sacrifice. She laid it out, smoothing the cloth on the table, arranging each dish with care, imagining the joy on her daughter-in-law's face, the relief in her children's eyes, the warmth of a family brought together not by wealth, but by love. Yet just as the air filled with the aroma of her labor, a new shadow crossed the threshold. The in-law arrived, surprised to find her there. Surprise quickly twisted into suspicion, into misunderstanding. "Why are you here? Why are you cooking?" the voice asked, sharp, uncertain. The policeman's mother tried to explain, her words soft, her tone filled with earnestness. But misunderstanding is a cruel beast, one that feeds not on truth, but on doubt. The in-law looked at her not with gratitude, but with hesitation, misreading kindness as intrusion, sacrifice as a gesture of guilt. For a moment, the policeman's mother's heart faltered, the weight of years of suspicion pressing down, but she forced a smile, forced her hands to keep moving, forced her voice to remain gentle. She invited the in-law to stay, to eat, but the woman refused, muttering excuses, leaving her once more in the half-light of doubt. And so, as the food simmered and the air grew thick with aroma, the policeman's mother gathered herself, cleaned the space, and prepared to leave before the children returned. Her body longed to rest, to sit and taste the fruits of her labor, but her heart told her otherwise. There was a grandchild at home waiting. There were chores undone. There was no time for indulgence. She stepped back into the night, her stomach empty, her body weak, but her soul filled with a bittersweet warmth. For though misunderstood, though unseen, she had done what she came to do. She had given them love in the form of food, and that was enough. As she walked home, the chicken bones simmering in memory, the sound of laughter she would not hear echoing only in her imagination, she whispered to the stars above, "Let them eat well. Let them know, even if they never say it, even if they never see it, that a mother's love walks with them always." The path was long, the night cold, but she pressed on, her shadow stretching before her, a fragile figure carrying an unbreakable heart. And though the world might never understand, though her sacrifice might never be named, the truth burned quietly within her. The truth that love, real love, needs no witness, needs no reward, needs no end. The table stood ready, dishes neatly arranged, though steam still curled upward like ghosts reluctant to leave. And in that moment, the policeman's mother felt both triumph and fear. Triumph that she had completed what her body nearly failed to do. fear that once again her gesture might be twisted into something it was not. The air outside shifted, and footsteps grew louder, and then the door creaked open. The daughter-in-law entering weary from work, her clothes damp with sweat, her hair sticking to her face, her eyes half closed from exhaustion. She stopped in the doorway, frozen, staring at the spread on the table, the chicken glistening with flavor, the rice steaming, the soup still trembling in its bowl. Surprise widened her eyes, her lips parted, confusion and suspicion colliding inside her chest. "Who cooked this?" she asked softly, her voice carrying both wonder and unease. The policeman's mother turned slowly, her back aching, her hands still damp from washing, her smile fragile but filled with hope. "I did," she said gently. "I found bamboo shoots today, sold them, bought this chicken, cooked it for you, for when you came home, tired." The daughter-in-law blinked, her heart leaping in directions she could not name, gratitude struggling against years of misunderstanding, suspicion battling with a warmth she had not expected. She approached the table, her hand hovering above the food as though afraid it might vanish if touched. For a moment she saw not intrusion but care, not control but sacrifice, and in her chest something cracked open, though she tried to hide it. The in-law still lingered, arms crossed, eyes sharp, voice laced with doubt. "Strange," she muttered. "So suddenly, after all this time, she cooks a meal and claims it is for love." The words sliced the air, sliced the heart of the policeman's mother. But she remained silent, for she knew explanations often fell on ears already closed. The daughter-in-law looked at her, then at the food, then at the in-law, torn between conflicting truths. Silence pressed down on them until at last the policeman's mother broke it, her voice trembling yet resolute. "Eat while it's warm," she whispered. "You work too hard, you need strength. I cannot give much, but I can give this." The daughter-in-law sat, her fingers trembling as she picked up chopsticks, her throat thick with words she could not form. She tasted the soup, hot and savory, and tears burned in her eyes before she could stop them. She remembered the mornings peeling bamboo shoots with her, the long walks, the harsh words from neighbors, the shadows of the past, and she felt something shift, a recognition of love disguised in toil, love misunderstood yet unbroken. She looked up at the policeman's mother, and though her lips barely moved, the words escaped, fragile but real. "Thank you." Those two words, simple and soft, landed in the mother's heart like rain upon parched soil, and for a moment she felt alive again, seen, even if only in passing. Yet she did not stay. She could not stay. She shook her head, waving her hand as if to dismiss gratitude, muttering about the grandchild waiting at home, about needing to cook more rice there, about duties unfinished. She gathered her worn scarf, adjusted her basket, and though the daughter-in-law begged softly, "Stay, eat with us," she stepped back toward the door, her body tired but her soul insisting on leaving, for love, in her eyes, was not about sharing in the feast but about giving it and walking away. The in-law sighed, still unconvinced, muttering under her breath, but the daughter-in-law heard nothing now except the echo of sacrifice. She watched the policeman's mother's frail figure vanish into the dusk, the air around her filled with the scent of chicken and herbs, yet her heart heavy with something else, something unspoken. She turned back to the table, sat quietly and whispered to herself, "How many times have I failed to see her heart? How many times have I mistaken her silence for indifference?" The food before her became more than nourishment. It became proof of devotion, silent but fierce, invisible but unyielding. Meanwhile, the policeman's mother walked the road home, darkness rising, her feet stumbling on stones, her body trembling with exhaustion. She clutched her chest, not from hunger alone, but from the weight of memory. How many times she had been judged, how many times she had offered love and received suspicion in return. Yet she did not curse it, did not regret it. Her lips curved in a weary smile as she imagined her children eating, her daughter-in-law finally tasting comfort. She whispered into the night, "Let them be full. Let them have strength. I can endure the rest." The stars above seemed to flicker in answer, and though her house awaited her with nothing but vegetables and rice, her heart carried the warmth of a feast she herself would never taste. Inside the children's home, laughter slowly bloomed as the daughter-in-law prepared the table for her husband, the policeman, who returned weary but drawn instantly to the scent. He entered, curious, surprised, asking questions, hearing the story repeated by his wife, the disbelief in his eyes softening into something gentler. He sat, ate, tasted, and for the first time in years, felt the presence of his mother not as a shadow of the past, but as a flame burning still, quietly, in every bite. He looked at his wife, saw her tears, felt his own rising, but he said nothing, because words seemed too fragile for the truth, now clear before them. Far away, the policeman's mother sat at her humble table, a small plate of vegetables before her, a bowl of rice, plain and thin. She lifted the chopsticks slowly, dipped into the soup of greens, and smiled despite the emptiness. In her mind, she could see them eating, hear their voices, feel their strength renewed. That vision was her feast, and in that feast, she found joy. Her body was frail, her life scarred by misjudgment, but her heart was boundless, carrying within it a love too vast to be diminished. And so the night closed around her, wrapping her in darkness. Yet inside her glowed a light unquenchable, the light of a mother whose love required no witness, whose sacrifice asked for nothing, whose happiness lay only in the well-being of those she called her own. The path back to her home was longer than it had ever been before, or perhaps it was her legs that had grown shorter, weaker, each step dragging behind the other. Yet the policeman's mother did not stop. Her basket light now for the chicken no longer rested there, but her heart heavy, not from regret, but from the weight of memories and the echo of voices that did not understand. The night air was sharp, carrying the smell of earth cooling after a hot day, carrying the whispers of insects hidden in the grass, and each sound seemed to remind her of years gone by, of times when she had carried burdens even heavier than this. Her shadow stretched ahead of her in the moonlight, thin and trembling, and she thought to herself that perhaps she had become a shadow too, a quiet presence moving unseen while her children lived their lives bright and loud in the world beyond her. Still, she whispered into the darkness, telling herself as though to a child, "They are full tonight. They ate. That is enough. That is everything." She pushed open the door to her small home, and the silence greeted her like an old companion, not cruel, not kind, simply there, surrounding her. The walls were bare, the floor rough, the hearth nearly extinguished, yet she moved with purpose, her hands lighting the fire again, setting a small pot of rice to warm, washing a handful of vegetables in a bowl of cold water. Her motions were slow, weary, but steady, and she spoke softly to herself, "Eat quickly. There is work tomorrow. The forest waits, the shoots do not peel themselves." When the rice was ready, she scooped it into a chipped bowl, added the vegetables, and sat down on the worn mat in the corner. The food was plain, almost tasteless, yet as she lifted the first bite to her lips, she smiled, because she could almost hear the sound of her son laughing at the other house, the sound of her daughter-in-law sighing with relief, the clatter of chopsticks against bowls, all because of the chicken she had cooked. In her mind, she tasted their happiness, and that was richer than any spice. Each grain of rice seemed to carry a memory. One grain reminded her of when her son was small, chasing chickens in the yard while she called after him. Another grain brought back the years of hardship when there was not enough food, when she had given him her share and told him she was not hungry, though her stomach ached for days. Another grain tasted like the day she watched him leave for the police academy, his back straight, his eyes burning with ambition, her heart filled with pride and fear all at once. The vegetables reminded her of her daughter-in-law, how she had first looked at her with suspicion, how words had sometimes been sharp, how silence had often stood between them, and yet beneath all that she had always wanted only to give, to care, to be of use. She chewed slowly, her eyes damp, whispering, "It is enough. I am full, because they are full." At the other house, the daughter-in-law sat in silence beside her husband. The table cleared, the meal finished, yet the weight of what had just happened still heavy in her chest. She replayed every detail, the sight of the policeman's mother's hands working, the tremble in her voice, the way she had refused to eat, the way she had left quickly, almost as if afraid to take too much space. Shame pricked at her heart, for she realized how blind she had been, how often she had misread silence as indifference, how often she had doubted love simply because it did not shout. She turned to her husband, her voice low. "She has always loved us," she said, almost to herself. "We just never saw it." The policeman stared at his hands, strong hands, hands that had carried weapons, signed orders, pulled people out of danger. But those same hands trembled now, for they remembered the frail hands of his mother, the ones that had washed his face as a child, the ones that had carried food to his mouth when he was too small to feed himself, the ones that had peeled bamboo shoots all day just to buy him a better meal. His throat closed and he whispered back, "We were blind." They did not speak more, for words felt too weak against the truth that had risen. But in their silence, they both resolved that they would not let her love go unseen again. Back in her small home, the policeman's mother finished her simple meal and leaned back, her body aching, her mind drifting. She thought of the in-laws' suspicious eyes, of the way gratitude had always been hesitant, of the way she had been misjudged again and again, yet none of it dimmed the warmth in her heart. She knew love was not about being understood, not about being praised. Love was about giving until there was nothing left to give, and then giving more. She folded her hands together, whispered a prayer not for herself, but for her family, for their health, for their strength, for their happiness. She asked for nothing, not even recognition, only that they live well, that they never know the kind of hunger she had known, that they never feel the loneliness she carried each night. Her eyelids grew heavy, her breath slowed, and she drifted into sleep on the mat, the fire flickering low, the bowl empty beside her. In her dream, she saw her son as a boy again, running through the bamboo forest, laughing, calling for her, and she ran after him, her legs strong again, her heart light, the years of pain erased. She dreamed of her daughter-in-law smiling at her without hesitation, reaching for her hand, calling her mother, and in that dream she felt the acceptance she had always hoped for. She dreamed of a family sitting together at one table, no divisions, no suspicions, only warmth, only love. And though it was only a dream, she smiled in her sleep, because even a dream was enough. The next morning, the daughter-in-law rose early, her heart restless, and she told her husband, "We must go to her today. We must not wait." They walked the familiar path to the policeman's mother's home, carrying fruit and rice, small gifts to show gratitude, their steps heavy with guilt but quickened by resolve. When they arrived, they found her already awake, sitting outside with her basket, preparing to leave for the forest again. Her face was tired, her body frail, yet her eyes lit up when she saw them, a spark of joy that burned brighter than the sun. She tried to rise quickly, to fetch water for tea, but her son stopped her, placed his hand gently on her arm, and said softly, "Mother, sit. We came to see you." The words pierced her heart, for rarely had he spoken with such tenderness, and she looked at him, at her daughter-in-law beside him, and she felt tears rise unbidden. They sat together, awkward at first, fumbling with words, but slowly the silence broke, and gratitude poured out, apologies whispered, promises made. The policeman's mother listened, her heart swelling, not because she needed apology, but because she saw at last that they understood, at last that the years of silent giving had not been in vain. She reached for their hands, squeezed them, whispered, "As long as you are well, I am well. As long as you are happy, I am happy." That day passed with more warmth than she had known in years. They ate together. Even if the food was simple, it tasted richer than any feast because it was shared with understanding. They spoke of the past, of hardships, of mistakes, but also of love, of resilience, of the bond that nothing could break. The policeman's mother looked at her son and his wife and thought, perhaps she could rest now. Perhaps she could carry her burdens a little lighter, for they finally saw her heart. Yet even as joy filled her, she knew her journey was not over. The forest still waited, the work still remained, the sacrifices would never end because that is what love demanded. But now, at least, she no longer walked entirely unseen, no longer gave entirely in silence. Her children's eyes had opened, and though late, it was enough. She smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in years, and whispered again the truth she had always lived by. Love does not need reward. Love does not need witness. Love simply is. And so the story ended not with grand gestures, not with riches or miracles, but with the quiet, enduring light of a mother's love, a love that had been doubted, misunderstood, overlooked, yet remained unbroken, unyielding, eternal. The policeman's mother returned to her work, her body still frail, her life still hard, but her heart now carried not just the burden of giving, but the gift of being seen. And in that, she found peace.